My name is Jason S.C. Fung, the host of Vanilla Club podcast. Today's episode is with Alex Noble. At the age of 16, Alex suffered a severe spinal cord injury, leaving him a C4 quadriplegic. Not only did Alex spend 4.5 days in a coma after surgery, he spent 9 months in rehab. And given the support from immediate family members, his unbelievably wide high school network, plus some total randoms he picked up along the way, in addition to his personal struggle, I Fight, You Fight is as apt a description as you can ask for to characterize the Alex Noble narrative. This was a team effort. This is Alex describing one of the moments along his road to recovery. And if ever there was a reminder of what able-bodied folks mustn't take for granted, this is it. And I quote, "The hospital clock was black with red LED numbers, or at least I thought it was. I didn't have the movement of my neck to know for sure, so I made it my first mission to be able to see it properly, to read the time. I knew if I tried hard enough and strained for long enough, eventually I would be able to. It gave me something to work towards." Unquote. Alex's life mission today is to share his stories of resilience, personal growth, and what some might call a warrior mentality. In 2024, Alex released his book, I Fight, You Fight, and in 2025 became a nominee for New South Wales Young Australian of the Year. We covered some important topics with Alex, including how to nurture quality thoughts, risk, and immortality. I thoroughly enjoyed reading his book, in particular his mum Kylie's heart-wrenching, self-narrated account in the audiobook version. One thing that I noticed that Alex did not mention in his narrative was on the topic of blame, either in regards to the opposing tackler who intimately was a counterpart to the tragic on-field injury that he suffered, or to rugby, the sport itself. In the podcast, I asked him about risk, I asked him about blame, and his answers, let's just say, they might surprise you. Alex Noble, welcome to the Vanilla Club podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to explore and converse with you.
Thank you so much. I like to begin our podcast with one simple statement, which is that Indigenous and First Nations voices matter. And with that, I'd like to jump right in with you. And I just had 3 quotes that you had from your book, which really jumped out at me, that I actually know myself. And as a younger man, I have a few years on you, I referred back to and actually have quite a bit of meaning for me. So when I read them in your book, they instantly resonated with me, right? And the first one was in chapter 4 when you mentioned Epictetus. And you mentioned, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it. And then I'll give you the second one, which was in chapter 9, you mentioned Nietzsche, and he who has a why can endure any how, which is another favorite of mine. And then in chapter 14, every man has 2 lives, and the second one begins when he realizes he only has one. From Confucius. Yeah.
The guy.
So I thought, again, because I'm the father of a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, part of the job that I have, because I get a lot of questions about things, about the world, about stuff, I have to rapidly summarize things for 10 and 8-year-olds. So I thought that these 3 quotes, which happen sort of at 3 parts of the book, actually in some ways act as a very helpful summary for some of the story that you tell in the book. And again, we can dive into some of the fascinating details that are discussed in the book. But I just wanted to say thank you again for writing it, and thank you for sharing what is, I think, an unbelievably sincere account of your life, in this book. So I was wondering if just to start off, if you had any thoughts or any reaction to those three quotes that I mentioned, again, just hitting you right up front with them.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you kind of extracted and selected those ones because, yeah, they're definitely three of my favourite too. And I think the crazy thing about all those three is each of those people that quoted them way back, you know, and so they quoted them, you know, so long ago, generations ago, but it's still applicable today. And it shows that, like, no matter what situation, the circumstances change, you know, there's more technology these days, everything's changed compared to what it was back then, especially in Epictetus and Confucius' time. Yeah, the principles are still the same. And it shows how powerful and valuable they really are because they transcend time. I live my life as per those quotes, and living by those quotes day to day in every decision you make, it really can change your life and also stabilizes you as well. Even though when life can get hostile and things can go up and down, but I think all those quotes moderate you. And yeah, I suggest everyone should live their life by those quotes because they are very valuable, powerful and effective.
For sure. You know, because when we go back to the book, I Fight, You Fight, which again, everyone who's listening to this should pick up. And I highly recommend the audiobook, principally because really if an author writes a book and doesn't take the time to narrate it themselves, I mean, it's almost, to me, kind of a skip. But when you see a book where not only does the author narrate it, but he enlists mom, dad, Benji,
took some convincing,
and got the entire family to contribute. It's a must listen. The chapter 3 from Kylie, from Mum, it was just unbelievably gripping because, you know, if I could just offer some of my thoughts on it, you know, I thought she, you know, your mum talked about some stuff that is a little bit taboo. She talked a little bit about her own sense of vulnerability, her own sense that, well, this tragedy happened. She talked about catastrophe, right? And being an English teacher herself, right? I think it's such a poignant line that she mentioned, where she basically said, yeah, we use words like catastrophe, you know, when she's teaching English melodramatically, right? But in this case, it was definitionally true. It was a catastrophe. It was a singular event that changed the trajectory of not just one life, but many lives attached to it. And I think you're blessed with having an amazing family behind you. I think we should talk a little bit, go back in time to 16 years old and to 2018 and just have a bit of a understanding of that. But I'd like to talk about that, and I'd like to talk about more what's happening in this phase of your life and the last couple years leading up to in 2025 when you're nominated as a New South Wales Young Australian of the Year. So maybe we can just talk a little bit about 2018 with you using your own words in the book. Sun-kissed, bronzed, Adonis, right? I don't think you used the word Adonis, but I'll use it for you.
I'll take it.
Someone who amassed 40 numbers when you went from Catholic boys' school to Catholic girls' school at Loreto Normanhurst. And you were competing with your mates to see how many numbers you could get from all of the counterparts at the girls' school, to the severe spinal injury that happened on the rugby pitch when you were 16, and again, the 270 days of recovery that resulted from it. Tell us a little bit about that day. Tell us a little bit about the event.
Yeah, so, well, up until I was 16 in 2018, yeah, like you said, I describe myself that way in the book, you know, bronzed, tanned, blonde haired, not Adonis, but I guess kind of the description's the same as Adonis in some ways. But yeah, the only reason I can kind of describe myself as that now without being arrogant and seem like you know, up myself is because I'm embarrassed of it, and I'm laughing at that person now, my younger self. And yes, I've lost so much of all those, I guess, attributes, but I'm also way more self-confident, way more valuable, way more have purpose. I feel like I'm way better than I ever was. And honestly, the things that I've done in my life now since my accident, I've grown and achieved and accomplished and become more than I ever thought that I would become, even when I was younger and had all those assets and attributes. So yeah, up until I was 16, I was just a typical kind of sporty kid, like in Hollywood movies where there's like the jock of the year, who was like, the best at sport. And yeah, my life revolved around sport, playing rugby, and my goal in life, my only goal, and ended up being my purpose, was to make it professionally in rugby, to play NRL or play for Rugby Australia or play for the Kangaroos. And that's all that mattered. And every single day I would just train and compete and play. Before school I would go to the gym, recess and lunch would just be footy the whole time, and then eat in class afterwards, with sweat dripping down my back, tie off, just because we just played a massive game of footy the whole time. And then after school would be straight down to the oval to have your rugby training session. Then I'd get home, smash 4 crumpets with peanut butter and strawberry jam, and then go down to the park, do some extras, kicking practice, some agility training, and then go to bed, wake up the next morning before school and go to the gym again. So yeah, it was just dedicated to footy. And during school, like in class, it wasn't listening to the teachers, it was watching JT's, Jonathan Thurston's rugby highlights on YouTube, or Billy Slater's or Darren Lockyer's, or my Huddle, which is like the software where they would record our games on the weekend. So if I wasn't watching a professional athlete, or was watching myself on the weekend to review my game and try to pick out the bits I need to work on and improve myself with rugby. So yeah, my whole life revolved around it. I was dedicated to it. But as a result, as I was on this pursuit of making it in rugby, I disregarded everything else in my life. I just had a single channel focus towards footy and nothing else. And so yeah, as a result, I disregarded everything else important in my life, like my family, relationships, school, study, knowledge, education, work, and everything else that I didn't really want to do, like, I don't know, chores or even helping others or serving others or, volunteering or giving up time for, or just being a good bloke. Disregarded all that too, because I was like so ambitious just to make it myself, and it was just like a selfish pursuit. And the only other things that I did in my life that I enjoyed, were have fun with friends, go to parties, drink alcohol at young ages as well, because I thought I was cool, I guess. And I think the reason I kind of did that, where I was trying to have the most friends and get the most girls and go to the parties and drink at young ages and all these things, is because I think it stemmed from always accomplishing things in rugby and succeeding in sport, and being awarded with certificates and trophies and coming first and winning, and the attention I got from that and the thrill I got from that and the rush. And so I wanted that more in everyday life, and I wanted that attention. I guess I ended up pursuing happiness and always relying on external things in order to make myself feel good. So like when I, knowing that I had the most friends, I got all the most attention from all my mates at school and outside of school, that gave me that rush and satisfaction and happiness. Or, getting the most girls, or when, like you said, going to Loretto Normanhurst in year 9 or 10 or whatever it was, and we had a competition of who would get the most phone numbers, and I got like 40 phone numbers and the next person got like 2. Like that made me so happy, again. So relying on those external situations and results to make myself feel happy internally. And so, yeah, I guess that's why my life was the way it was. And it ended up, from where I am now, I realize that it wasn't actually, on face value, everyone would be like, oh, he's got the perfect life. He's fit, healthy, strong, athletic, good at sport, has heaps of friends, gets the most girls. Everyone would think that's the best life, that's what everyone wants. But now that I look back, I'm like, it just makes me like, ugh. Like, it's just superficial and materialistic and shallow, and really has no meaning at all in what actually matters, such as contributing to society making a difference, helping others, leaving a legacy and actually therefore living, I didn't do any of that. And so, I kind of see my old life as just superficial. And also, I know that I was a whole lot sadder or angry than I am now. Like, I'm happier, I'm more content, I'm more aware of myself, I know who I am, I've found purpose, I've actually, since my injury, I've actually lived. Whereas I think before my injury, I was just existing, literally. And so, I think the reason why I'm more happy now and more content and more peaceful and not angry and all these other things compared to before is because, like I was saying, I was relying on those external situations and results in order to feel happy. I was literally on the pursuit of happiness. And the issue with the pursuit of happiness is that your situations and your results aren't always going to be positive and good. Sometimes it's going to be a bad day, or sometimes you're not going to come first, or sometimes you're going to lose, or sometimes, life storms come our way all the time, and it's completely unavoidable no matter how fit or strong or how good your life is. Every single person on earth is going to face difficulties and life storms, and if you haven't yet, well, it's coming, and you shouldn't avoid that fact. You should understand that and accept it and just learn how to prepare for it and be ready for it. And for me, I never was. So when a difficulty came my way, or when I lost or failed, or I had to do chores, or had to, go do work or study, I would hate it, wouldn't do it. I would blow up, I'd get angry, I'd get miserable, I would blow up on my parents, I'd cry, all these things I remember, which is awesome in the book. Like, one time I had to get a haircut and cut my blonde off, and they cut too much off and it looked bad. And so I literally, I was in year 9 or maybe even in year 10, and I literally cried at the shopping centre in the hairdressers because they stuffed my haircut up. I'm like, what the hell was I doing? But that's how superficial, and I wasn't content with myself, and I wasn't at peace, and I was relying on external stimulation and things to make myself feel good. And so, that was my life literally every day up until I was 16. And then the day of the injury, it was the 21st of October, 2018, one Sunday morning, and was training for the New South Wales rugby schoolboys sevens team. And so it was the trial day, so it was trial to pick the starting team. And so I remember waking up nice and early that Sunday morning. It was about 6 a.m. and my alarm woke me up, and I remember I got straight out of bed because I was excited and pumped up for the day, for the session. So I turned my alarm off and got straight out of bed and chucked my shorts on and my shirt on and my socks on. And I remember every morning I would always lay out my socks and shorts and shirt in like sequential order too. Like, it'd be socks at the bottom, above that the shorts, above that the shirt, and then the bag and the shoes down the bottom, like kind of like laying out a body. Got everything on, and made my berry smoothie, which was my game day ritual. We were driving to Knox College, where we had this session, and it was I remember driving, looking out the window. I was on my L's at the time, so I was driving, my dad was in the passenger seat, and looking out the window, it was a really overcast and gloomy, dull, cold Sunday morning, and it was raining, and the raindrops were smashing against the window, the windscreen, and we're driving along, and the windscreen wipers were pumping, and eventually we arrived at Knox, and I parked the car, and I began walking over to the grandstand where all the boys were getting strapped up and putting their boots on and getting ready for the session. And eventually we started, and the first 10-15 minutes was the typical warm-up exercises and drills. About 15 minutes later, the coaches instructed us to play a 7v7 opposed game, so a full contact game of rugby against one another for the internal trial. And this trial game was what they were using to select the starting team. And so we began, and for the first, must have been 10 minutes straight, we didn't touch the ball once. We were defending the whole time, set after set, defending our line, couldn't get possession at all. And finally, my teammate got a pilfer and turned the ball over. And so, we finally got possession. And so for me, it was kind of, I wasn't really a good defender. I was more of an attack. That's where my skill set lied, because I was a fly half. And so, that's kind of where I could perform at my peak, I guess, and show my skills. So for me, when we got possession, it was my time to shine, and my time to show the selectors what I was made of and what I've dedicated, 4 or 5 hours a day, every day for the past 13, 14 years to show them what I've trained my whole life for. So just before my teammate got tackled, after he pilfered the ball, he passed it to me. It was a nice long pass. It was about 10 meters. Caught in two hands out in front of my chest, just like the coaches always taught us. And I tucked the ball under my right arm. And then I looked up and there was the defender in front of me. And so to get past the defender to avoid being tackled and make some more meters and go score a try, I chucked a goose step. And so that's pretty much when you run really fast and you slow down and you immediately speed up again. And so at the same time as I did this goose step, I also stuck my left arm out to fend the player in the chest to push him away from me. But as I did this, the player grabbed my wrist with his right hand and grabbed my shoulder with his left hand. And as he had full control of my arm, he yanked it straight down to the floor and caused me to nosedive and smash the left side of my cheek straight into the hard dirt. And the momentum of this tackle carried the rest of my body, my legs and my feet over the top of my head as my head got stuck on the floor. And the next thing that I know is I laid there in the middle of that oval, flat on my back, looking up to the dark and gloomy clouds in the sky, and with 30 of my teammates and coaches all standing around me, looking down at me. And I remember the rain was, trickling down on my face, and all of a sudden I could no longer move a single thing from head to toe. The only thing I could move was my eyes. My whole entire body went numb. My whole entire world went silent, and my body went ice cold. And I guess that split second, that Sunday morning, is when I went from that young, healthy, athletic kid running around with a big smile on his face to simply, a quadriplegic in a wheelchair for the rest of my life, unable to move anything. And I remember lying there on my back in the middle of that oval, and I felt like my arms and legs were above me, like towards the sky. But in my peripheral vision, just to my right, I could see my arm laid flat out across the floor over here. And I saw my arm over to the right, but I felt like my arm was up above me. And so it felt like I was literally like decapitated from my body, like disconnected. And so I guess it was that point where I kind of realized where this isn't a typical rugby injury. This isn't a sprained ankle or a I don't know, a little fracture like you often get with rugby, but it was something different. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that it was different. I think how I felt about the situation, I was confused, but also aware that it was a different type of injury, but also maybe in denial too, because I remember lying there on my back on the grass, and after they got all of the players to go away from me to give me space, the physio was holding my head to prevent me, isolate it, to prevent me from breaking my neck even more. And so he was holding my head, and I remember speaking to him, and I said to him, do you reckon I'll be right for my school rugby trial tomorrow? Because the next day, that Monday afternoon, I was in year 10, I was trialing for the first 15, and we had the big trial match that afternoon. So I said to him, do you reckon I'll be right for the trial tomorrow? And I actually thought that I might be at that time. But so I guess I was just oblivious and was completely unaware that it was a C4 or break of my C4 vertebrae, and that I would be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. I think that ignorance or being unaware kind of was a good thing in the long run. From that point, I lied there, waited for the ambulance to arrive, which felt like a lifetime. Felt like years for the ambulance to come, but eventually I could hear these sirens like wailing from, I don't know, in the distance, like probably kilometers away, and I kind of knew that was it coming for me. And so it eventually arrived, and there was like 7 or 8 people that helped me roll onto the stretcher, and then from the stretcher they put me in the back of the ambulance, and we started heading towards Westmead Children's Hospital, because I was 16. I think younger than 18 goes to Westmead Children's Hospital. But as we were heading towards Westmead Children's Hospital, they ended up changing direction and going towards North Shore Hospital instead. That was actually a really, really good thing, and my life would probably be so different if I did go to Westmead Children's Hospital, because I think Royal Rehab, which was the rehab I went to, which is like a leading edge rehab centre in Sydney, which is actually right near my house. A lot of the spinal cord injuries from Royal North Shore go there, whereas Westmead Children's, you go to a different one, which is, I think, nowhere near as good. the rehab that they go to. So yeah, that was a really, really, good thing. But at the time, I just didn't even realize that. Anyway, so I was in the back of the ambulance with my mate Bill, I played rugby with, who was in my year, and I was getting pumped with the maximum amount of morphine, and I remember me and Bill were just having a typical normal mates conversation, despite all of the trauma and horrible situation and all the everything going on in that moment. But I think that he was intentionally having those conversations with me, just having a little laugh and standard mates conversation, just to to distract me and to prevent me from thinking about all of the things that are going on in that moment, which I can see that now, and I really appreciate it. I think it was a good thing. And so eventually we arrived at North Shore Hospital, and I remember I knew when we arrived because it was kind of like light from the daylight, and then all of a sudden it went dark, and I think that's where we went underground through the emergency at North Shore. And then moments later they parked the car, the back doors of the ambulance opened, and then from that point it was just the rush kept going. So we went from the stretcher down out of the ambulance onto a hospital bed, and then from there we went flying into these emergency doors in the hospital, and I'm lying flat on my back looking up to the ceiling, and we're just flying down the hallway with like lights going, net light on the roof. And it was kind of like the Hollywood movies, when they're arriving at an emergency center at a hospital. It was literally like that. I felt exactly like that. And there was like 3 nurses or doctors, I don't even know who they were, on either side of the bed, and 2 at the top and 1 at the bottom. We're all just flying down the hallway and going a million miles an hour, and I had no idea what was going on. Everything was just happening all at once. It was just getting flooded with so many different things. And we eventually arrived at some room that another pair of doors opened, and then I was in this room, and then the door shut behind me, and then I was just me all of a sudden in a room by myself. I was in the X-ray room. And so from going from that much, ambulance sirens wailing, to 7 or 8 different nurses and doctors, to flashing lights, to all this panic and chaos and trauma, to then just silence, just in my room waiting there for the X-ray. It was really, really confronting, I guess, moment, and kind of put me in a state of shock a little bit, I think. But even though it went from loudness and panic to complete silence, I think paradoxically it went louder, because in my head it went way louder, because I could actually have time to think, because it was silent. That's when the thoughts in my head started. Like, what the hell is going on? What has happened to me? What am I doing? What injury is this? What is my future going to be like? Just a million thoughts and questions to myself. And so, I was in that X-ray room for, felt like ages again, and just getting the scans on my neck so they could pass the scans to the surgeon so they know what to do with the operation. And so eventually, felt like years later, again, after the X-ray, I went into another room, and it was the MRI room. And that one felt like even longer than the X-ray room, because you get shoved in an MRI machine, which most people have. There's the roof of the MRI machine like centimeters away from you, and they're playing the shitty, loud, repetitive music in your ears that's just going vroom, 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 felt like another lifetime. And again, the thoughts keep racing. What's going on? What's happened to me? Am I dead? Where's my body? All these things, because remember, all I could move was my eyes, and I didn't know where my body was. Couldn't feel it or anything. It was just, all I was it felt like it was a pair of eyes. It felt like a dream, but a nightmare. Anyway, I eventually got out of the MRI machine, went back out of the room, and that's when I saw my mum and my dad for the first time. And they were both standing there by the side of the bed, and they said to me, they kind of just said, it's going to be okay, or whatever happens, we're here for you and we love you. There's not much else you could really say in that moment, because they had no idea what was going on. Neither did I. No one knew, except maybe the surgeon who probably just got the scans, and he knew that it was a sever of the C4 vertebrae in my neck, and that I'm going to need spinal surgery, and that I'm going to be quadriplegic for the rest of my life. But we didn't know that, and so that's why Mum and Dad just said, whatever happens, we'll be here for you. And then seconds later, I was knocked out. They injected me with anesthesia, and that's when I underwent spinal surgery, and I think it was like a 9.5 hour surgery. And I woke up 4.5 days later in the intensive care unit at North Shore Hospital with, tubes down my throat, breathing for me, tubes coming out of my chest and arms and shoulders and hands and neck and mouth and nose. Just flat on my back on that bed, pinned to it, unable to move my legs or arms or head. The only thing I could move was my eyes, and I was just staring at a white ceiling, unable to do anything, even breathe or eat or drink. Then from there, I spent another 9 months in hospital and rehab. But yeah, I guess that was the immediate acute phase of the injury. And yeah.
Did you ever feel anger towards the bloke who tackled you?
No, so that was one of my first thoughts as I became conscious again. I intentionally forgave him immediately as soon as I possibly could, as soon as I could think again. And because I knew that it could be so easy to hold that grudge and that revenge and hate him and all these things. And that's the natural response, that's the human response, that's human behavior. Our natural response is to, have hate against someone or seek revenge, But I intentionally avoided that at all costs because I know that not only is it going to hold a grudge against him, but it's going to have a negative impact on myself. It's going to prevent me from moving forward, Because when you're holding on to something in the past, it's literally like you're holding on to a bar and you're unable to move forward because you're still holding on to that thing in the past. So I knew that if I didn't forgive him, that I would never be able to continue to move on and live and try to reach my full potential because I'm still stuck in my past where the situation and the injury happened. So yeah, I immediately forgave him. And it wasn't even really a bad tackle, to be honest, either, so it wasn't his fault. And even if it was his fault, even if it was he had intention to inflict harm on me and make me a quadriplegic, I would still forgive him because I want to benefit myself. I want to allow myself to move forward. So I think that in life, when anyone does any wrong to someone, whether it's intentional or not, in your own self-interest, you should just forgive that person in order to be liberated, to liberate yourself, to become the person that you're capable of being, because the only thing that regret and grudge and revenge does is prevents you from moving forward and prevents you from growing and achieving what you can achieve because you're still stuck in your past.
Definitely, but I bring that up because, again, I started with the Epictetus quote in chapter 4 about, it's not about what happens to you, it's about your reaction to it, right? So I guess one question I'd really, I had when I was reading the book, and I'd like to ask you, is to go from the end of that characterization that you just gave us, where you're done with the 270 days, there's still a little bit of a gap from going from there to Epictetus, where you're ready to now work on your reaction to what happened. I'm just curious about some of the emotions that you went through. Tell us a little bit about the phases, right? I mean, there must have been a phase of grief, that you had to deal with. Maybe you kept it in yourself, maybe you shared it again with your family, it's a private thing. But I'm thinking for other listeners who may be going through something, if they're feeling down, if they're feeling, it's a bad day, is it okay to have some negative thoughts? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have had bad moments, sure. I've had times when it's tougher than others, but I've never had a bad day. And I think that goes back to that quote by Epictetus, I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become, or whatever variation you want to give it. Because you do control the way between stimulus and response, there's a space, and your space is the way how you choose to respond to that stimulus. And so as long as you don't let that immediate bad situation to have a negative effect on you and your emotions and your response going forward, and you, as soon as you possibly can, try to respond to it and channel it or take control in order to either, turn it from dirt into fertilizer and help you grow, or just accept it if it's uncontrollable, chuck it out the window and move on, and therefore not be fazed by it. You've got to find a way to not let it affect your day, because otherwise it's just going to have an ongoing negative impact. Our emotions and our mood and what we do and what we achieve and how we feel aren't determined by our circumstances. The way we feel and the way we live and the way we grow and the way we do things and our moods depend on what we think about our circumstances. And so whenever a circumstance goes wrong in my life, or when I have a moment that's worse than others, I remember that that is not the definition of how I feel. I have the power to control how I feel. So I never let it affect me for a long period of time, essentially, or for a whole day.
Yeah, no, definitely. I guess for me, and maybe for some listeners too, there's a tremendous amount of bravery that it does take. And I think you would agree with me, right? That it's harder for some people to do that than for others. I mean, I'll give you an example in my life. I was in a ferry accident, 2016, and there was 30 people in the ferry. We struck, we think it was a fallen container, shipping container that had fallen into the Hong Kong harbor. And the ferry struck it, and there were 30 people in the ferry out of about 200 that were pretty severely injured. I hit the seat in front of me, had a relatively significant injury. But for me, even in that case, I had a lot of anger. You know, I wanted to sue the ferry company. There was a phase, it might have been a month or 2 months. And luckily my wife was able to help sort of talk me down, right? But I wanted, somebody had to pay for this, you know? And I guess you mention it as sort of like the forgiveness and everything like that, but I do think it's a special person who's able to go from, okay, I'm doing this because it's good for me and for my long-term future, and I'm just gonna quaff it and deal with it. And I think you're, you know, as I said, there's a real bravery there, because a lot of people would struggle with that.
I think in those situations, like I said, the immediate natural response is to get all these negative emotions just rush straight to your brain, and they fully blind you from rationality and clarity. And so as a result, people only focus on themselves and like that revenge and that anger and like, I want to sue the ferry company, all these things. But if you are able to just pause for a sec, take a big deep breath, step out of your situation, see it from a completely rational point of view, and you distinguish between, okay, if I do go down this pathway of, you know, holding on to that anger, have revenge, and, you know, just try to focus on suing the ferry company, versus going down the pathway of, okay, accepting that situation, identifying the controllables and the uncontrollables, accepting the uncontrollables, chucking them out the window and just forgetting about them, literally disregarding them and moving on and focus on the controllables. Which situation is gonna benefit me more? Or if I go down the pathway of that revenge and anger, it's gonna, like I said before, prevent me from being able to move forward and grow and focus on my day and, you know, living literally and being happy and being in a good mood and ticking boxes and achieving goals and growing and becoming who you're capable of becoming, versus going down the pathway of accepting and moving on. Well, you can continue to live, you continue to grow, tick boxes, achieve goals, be happy, be in a good mood. So it's like, of course I'm gonna go down that pathway. So I think the ability to step out of the situation that you're in, to see it from a rational point of view, and not allowing those negative thoughts blind your vision, which is what happens all the time, because it is our natural response. It's not that you're weak, it's natural, it happens to all of us. But those who are able to step out of that zone, see it clearly with clarity and rationality, and then identify the best response and choosing to select that best response and go down that pathway, then I think that's what distinguishes those people that are able to not be fazed by those negative situations versus the people that are fazed by negative situations. And like I said before, well, for me, I like have bad moments, but I never have bad days, because I think I have developed the ability to see my situations from a rational point of view and an unemotional point of view. And as a result, I'm able to select the best response most of the time, or at least I try my best to, and therefore I'm not fazed by those situations for a whole day, only just a short period of time.
You mentioned briefly about faith. I think Mum brings it up in chapter 3 too. How did faith play a role in your recovery?
Yeah, so well, before my injury, like I believed in Jesus and Christian and Catholic, and Mum used to always force us to go to church every Sunday, and I never really liked going, and I believed, but I wasn't like a heavy believer, I guess. But after my accident, I still don't really go to church every Sunday. Probably I do way less than I used to. Mum no longer forces us to go to, so that as a result we don't really go unless it's Easter or Christmas. However, I've become way more reliant on faith and Jesus and God, and I pray like literally 8 times a day on average, I reckon. Any chance I get. One, yes, I believe, but also I think the reason I mainly do it is because it's just like a meditation tactic. It's an effective strategy to help me throughout life to respond to difficulties and to maintain in a good mood and to continually push myself to my limits to, try my very best and help me to reach my full potential. So I think that for people that aren't religious, you can still, like I talk to Jesus, that's because I'm religious, but you can still do the exact same thing to anything. It doesn't have to be God or Jesus. You can literally, it's just a meditation tactic. So I'll give you an example that I do quite frequently. So whenever a difficulty comes my way and it's a shitty situation, and a natural response will be to, oh, F this, or oh, why me, oh, again, this is cooked. Like, well, no one else goes through this, why do I have to, or my life sucks, right? As soon as I end up in a situation like that, I would be like, before those thoughts come in, I'll be like, okay, Alex, stop, breathe for a sec. Then I would talk to God, well, not talk to him, but kind of, and I would be like, okay, well, I'll imagine myself in a situation where I was worse off. For example, you could make up any situation, but I'll use one that I was actually in. Like, for example, okay, imagine if I was back in the ICU where I was pinned to the bed, unable to move my legs or arms or head, completely stuck to the bed, only be able to move my eyes, looking at the ceiling for 9 days straight, unable to breathe on my own, unable to eat or drink or do anything, every breath wondering if it's gonna be the last one I ever take, my mouth destroyed because I haven't had water in 9 days. Like, in that moment, I would do anything to be where I am in this actual situation where it's a so-called difficulty. I would do anything to be here. And so then when I'm here in this situation, it'd be like, I'm actually grateful for that situation that initially seemed like a horrible, traumatic, unfair, difficult situation. I find gratitude within the difficulty, and as a result, I am immediately placed in a state of peace, and I'm content when the natural response, or a lot of other people maybe, or I could have easily also been destroyed by that difficult situation, whatever it is. So I think that it's a really powerful technique and strategy, and the thing that's also good about it is in life it could always be worse, right? No matter how horrible your situation is, no matter how unfair or traumatic or bad, or no matter how difficult it is, someone's always worse out there. And so that's a really paradoxically good thing, because you can apply that strategy whenever or wherever or whatever happens to you. Another example that you can translate to most other people listening to this is that, like a world war, or the people in Ukraine right now, when you fail your exam at university or school, at the same time you've broken your ankle, at the same time your mum's sick, and at the same time you have to sell your house because you can't afford it, and everything's going wrong, and you're behind work, you think the world's targeting you, think life's horrible, you think like, oh, I need a break, or why me, everything's so hard. Just stop for a sec, take a breath, and imagine if you were in Ukraine right now when your roof just got, blown off your house, and your sister just died because she got hit by the bomb too, and you're about to have to go out there and fight the war, and you haven't eaten in 2-3 days, and you haven't slept. It's like, if you're in that situation, I promise you would do anything to be where you are right now, where you're got a roof over your head, you can, you're moving to a house down the road, or you can study at uni, and your mum's still alive, and it's just your ankle, it's not your whole leg or your whole body, or you're still alive. If you're in that situation in Ukraine, you do anything to be where you are right now, and you would say to yourself, man, I would be so happy if I had all that. So realize all that you have, realize that your life is actually incredible. It'll show you all the things that are good, and immediately put you back in that state of peace and content, even though initially everything was telling you how bad your life was. And so Now when you go and confront difficult situations like that, where most people would get imprisoned and destroyed by all those negative feelings and emotions and thoughts that come to you, you aren't, and therefore you're able to respond to that situation positively, optimistically, and quickly, and therefore not be set back and move on where other people would fall off and be affected and be imprisoned. And therefore you can strive and prosper more than others because, again, back to the quote of Epictetus, you're not defined by what happened to you, but you are what you choose to become. And if you choose to strive forward and kick goals and move forward and become the person you're capable of becoming, well, you're going to win. So I think that's really important to be able to implement those strategies in order to not be defined by your emotions and difficulties in external situations, and instead find that state of internal peace, because that way you can stabilize your mood, stabilize your optimism, stabilize the way you feel. So when things go wrong, you're okay. When things are good, you're okay. When things are normal, you're okay. You'll just keep on striving forward and not be set back.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think there's a lot in there for us sort of civilians who are going about our daily lives, who may not have as heightened a crisis to deal with, to apply some of those ideas. Even, it's you can't live in Sydney and not face some of the traffic madness that we face, where people, they're almost ready to run you over. It feels like when you are too slow at the roundabout, and it's sort of like, okay, you've got a ton of steel. You're gonna physically try to push me off the road because I'm 2 seconds too late. I mean, I think if somebody listened to what you're saying, which is that one, put whatever situation that you have into context, right? Like if you're 5 minutes late for work, it's not the end of the world, right? That's in the scheme of things that can happen to you, an extremely minor setback, right? To put things into context, and also to remember that, no matter how bad things are, they can also get a lot worse.
One of the reasons why mental health is such an issue these days, and why people are so often miserable and sad, is because we have become so advanced and so efficient, and technology's become so beneficial and makes life so easy, and everything's just so easy compared to what it used to be. And so the difficulties we face and the challenges we go through and the effort we have to go through in order to get something, like whenever you want water, you just go to your tap. Whenever you want food, you don't even have to go to Coles anymore. You can just get Uber Eats, or you can get, what do you call it? I don't know, Coles delivery. Everything is so easy. If you want to go to the shops, Amazon, online, you don't even have to leave your bed to live, Sure, that's all great, really beneficial, don't get me wrong. But a consequence and side effect of all that is, because people don't go through nowhere near as many challenges and have to put in as much effort as our ancestors did, when we are forced to go through some sort of effort, when we are forced to confront some sort of life challenge, we're not ready for it. We're not equipped. We don't know how to deal with it. It impacts us so much more because we're not used to it. We're not conditioned anymore. You know what I mean? Because everything's just done for us. Technology just does it for us. And so I think that's one of the side effects, but doesn't mean it has to be like that either. I think we just need to be able to realize more that when we are forced to confront those challenges, and we are forced to confront those difficult life events and put in more effort, we need to step outside our zone and realize that there are people out there in different countries that are less fortunate than us, and there's people out there that still have to trek it 5-10 kilometers just to get water. There are some people out there in other countries where they haven't ate for 3 days because they can't afford it. There are some countries out there that their mum got taken away to some gang or whatever, and people out there doing it so much more tough. And so if you step out of your zone in Sydney and all of the privilege that you have, and realize that people are going through way worse stuff that would do anything to be where you are right now, when a difficulty comes your way, you'll be like, okay, I am still grateful. I can still see all the positives. My life is actually still really, 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 really good. And I should not be focusing all my attention on this one little thing that went wrong. But reframing your thoughts, I guess, it allows you to find that positivity and happiness no matter what situation you find yourself in. And I think another reason why happiness is such a big issue these days, even though life is so much easier, where in theory we should be therefore so much happier because our circumstances are better, so we should feel better, but it doesn't actually work like that because like I said earlier, our emotions, the way we feel, isn't dependent upon our circumstances, it's dependent upon what we think about our circumstances. But I think the issue that mental health and happiness is an issue these days is because our wants and desires are so high. And I think that happiness is the difference between what you have and what you want. So it's what you have minus what you want. So if you want more than what you have, well then it goes, you're gonna be unhappy. And so if your wants equal what you have, well then you'll be okay, you're pretty happy. But if what you have is higher and more than what you want, that's how you achieve true happiness. So I think that in today's day and age, in the 21st century, our desires and wants are so high. We want that other house. We want that to go to a better school. We want, more money. We always want more. We always want that. When you get like a Adidas shirt, it's good for, a day or a week, but then you're like, man, I want Gucci. And then it's like, I want Louis V.
Yeah.
Everything, like followers, likes, comments, friends, all of these things. And so because we're always, our desires and wants are so high, when our wants don't equal that gap, that disparity is where our unhappiness lies. So in order to fix that issue and in order to become and find and achieve happiness, you don't need to attain more or increase your circumstances and level up to meet your wants. Or you don't need to get the better house in order to feel happy. You don't need to get the Louis V in order to feel happy. You don't need to get more money in order to feel happy. You just need to lower your desires and wants to meet what you have and to meet your circumstances. And that way you achieve that happiness. And then if your wants and desires go below what you have, that's how you achieve really true happiness. So that's kind of like an equation that I've came up with recently. So to summarize, it's like your happiness equals what you have minus what you want. And so therefore, if it's like, say, what you have is 5, should say 5 is the number. What you have is 5, but what you want is 10, well then you minus 5 happiness. If what you have is 5, if what you want is 5, 0. So you're in between, kind of happy. But if what you have is 5 and what you want and what your desires are is 2, well you're level 3 happiness, so you're really happy. So you see that equation? I think it's
cool.
Yeah, it's a really
so
good.
You want the surplus.
Yeah, you want the surplus. 0 is in between, you're pretty happy. Below 0, unhappy. More than 0, really happy. So essentially, you don't need to strive for more. You don't need to increase your circumstances. You don't need a better house, all these things in order to feel happy. Just lower your desires, lower your wants, and you'll be able to find happiness in all things.
So this is developed from some of the framework that you presented in the book about peace over happiness.
Exactly, yeah. And not pursuing happiness, because pursuing happiness is those wants being higher than what you have.
Yeah, and happiness really is something, it's sort of, I think people who strive directly for happiness oftentimes, find it's really elusive. Happiness is a byproduct of doing good work, giving back, being connected with your family and so on. But when you say, "Oh, I want happiness," it's very hard to achieve.
Yeah, if you're trying to get happiness, if you're trying to pursue happiness, you're never ever going to get there. Because and another element to that equation, of my happiness equation, is even if you do get what you have to equal your wants, even when you do get the house, you might be happy for a day or a week or a month or a year, but after a while, your wants are going to go up again. You're going to want another. It's hedonic adaptation,
Hedonic adaptation.
When you get something, it's good for a bit, but eventually
you're
going to want another thing. So that means you're constantly on a hamster cycle of trying to achieve happiness, and you're never truly going to get there. And in my life, I've found the only way that you can achieve true, genuine, constant, long-term happiness isn't by pursuing happiness. It isn't by relying on external things or circumstances or assets or materialistic items. It's the complete opposite of all that. To find true, genuine, constant happiness, it's found internally, and internally from that state of peace. And to find peace, you can use those strategies that I was talking about earlier, like, you know, having your wants lower than what you have, you know, finding gratitude when life tries to knock you down. Because sure, when people hear the word gratitude, they're like, oh yeah, I'm grateful, or I've heard the word a million times. And sure, everyone's grateful when times are good, right? Everyone's grateful for when they're at the restaurant eating a nice steak or overseas on holidays. They love those moments.
Alfredo, right?
Yeah, and they love it, they appreciate it. But I don't think I've met many people at all in my life that can truly find gratitude when life knocks them down. And I don't really see many people teach that principle either, but I think it is probably the most powerful principle. If you can genuinely find gratitude when everything's going wrong in your life, when the world's targeting you, then that's how you really can find happiness at all times, no matter where you are.
I mean, again, I picked out these three quote givers, right? Because again, there's something that Nietzsche talks about, right? Which is amor fati, which is, you know, it's to love your fate, right? That whatever's thrown at you, it doesn't matter. You have to find a way to love your fate. That's one of his classic maxims that you could probably put up right against this one. You know, the Stoics also had negative visualization, right? Which I really would love to get a little bit of your take on, because their method was, even if things are going great, you're wealthy, you're some patrician in Rome, you're a senator and everything like that, imagine somebody bashing your, you know, house down and stealing all of your cattle and leaving you destitute. Because going through that process mentally of negatively visualizing what could go wrong will actually help you cherish what you do have.
100%. And I think, pretty sure it's Seneca also. Seneca, he was like, you know, a Roman politician, had everything, was really privileged, you know, had wine whenever he wanted, girls fed him grapes, all these things, right? But what he would do is, like, once a fortnight or once a month, he would go out and live on the street with the homeless intentionally. Didn't have to, obviously, at all, but he'd intentionally go out there, live on the street for a few nights with the homeless. And the reason he did that is to intentionally avoid the possibility of no longer seeing and appreciating all those things and, you know, becoming gluttonous and, you know, ended up being on that cycle of pursuing happiness, because he intentionally went through suffering, because when he was suffering, that revealed to him how good his life was. But if you never go through that suffering, you don't know how good your life is, because it's the standard. This is like, oh, this is normal. But if you put yourself down here, then it shows that what your life is actually great relative to the suffering. But if you're never going through suffering, then it's just normal all the time. And you're always needing more in order to feel happy. And so I think that's a really powerful tactic, and I definitely do that too. And I think also on the pursuit of life and on the pursuit of achieving your goals and on the pursuit of, you know, fulfilling and accomplishing and trying to become the person you're capable of becoming and achieving your full potential, you should really learn to embrace and accept and love difficulties, as you were talking about, because on the road to achieving your goals, when a difficulty comes your way, it's like, it's meant to be hard. It's meant to be difficult. And if it's not difficult, well then try harder, like increase your goals. Like if you're not going through difficulties, then you should be trying more and you should be set your goals higher, because on the road to greatness, on the road to the greatest and biggest and largest and most significant goals ever, you know, you're supposed to go across difficulties and come across difficulties and challenge, because that's what makes the end goal valuable. That's what gives it importance. That's what gives it value. Because if it was easy, and if it was easy to get that goal, then everyone would get it. And when everyone gets it, well then it's no longer valuable because everyone has it, right? It's like to get to presidency, for example, or prime minister, you know, it is hard to get there. You're going to come across many obstacles and difficulties. If it was easy and you could just select the button of becoming prime minister or president or whatever, well then everyone would just select it and be it. So the difficulties in the process and the route to get there is what gives that role value. And so when I go through my life and I'm trying to achieve a big goal and trying to accomplish a big thing, you know, when a difficulty comes my way, I'm like, yes, this is good. This is where most people fall off. Like I literally can visualize it as like, I can see other people that would then give up in that situation. And so because I know that, I interpret that difficulty as, this is why a lot of people can't get there, because it is hard, and this is where 50% of people or more give up and fall off and stop trying to get that goal. That was like motivates me, is like, I'm going to keep going, because I just pretty much went up the rank to get to that thing, you know? And so when the next difficulty comes along, I'm like, yes, more people fell off. Next challenge gets thrown at me, yes, more people fell off. And sure, it's going to require a lot of effort and challenge and suffering and sacrifice and whatever it is and effort to overcome that difficulty. But because I know that if I can get through that, where a lot of other people wouldn't, I know that I'm closer, one step closer to that goal. And in the end, when I get there, it makes it all worth it anyway. And so, yeah, I think it's important to embrace, appreciate, accept, prepare, and love the difficulties, because if it was easy, there's no point getting it anyway.
Embrace the suck.
Exactly, embrace the suck.
You know, I was talking, my best mate is a physicist, and you know, he was telling me that they predict that the human stomach in some reasonable time frame is basically going to become a vestigial structure. It's going to become basically useless, from the standpoint that our food now is too clean. We don't actually need the stomach. You can go straight from your esophagus right into the intestine. The stomach itself is useless from the standpoint that a lot of the work that it does is it cleans the food, right? It's like, okay, give us some really like dirty, like carrots with the soil attached and, you know, little pebbles and things like that. That's what it's used to. But because of our modern industrial food system, we don't really need the stomach anymore. You know, but I think it reminds me of that conversation about what you're saying about how everywhere around us, we are devoid of those micro sufferings, right? And that when a real bout of suffering comes upon us, and they happen, when it rains, it pours, right? Oftentimes we're so ill-equipped, we're so unprepared for them, and we don't have the tools. And some part of it is physical, right? Like you talk about in the book. Physically, athletes tend to have better results with severe spinal cord injuries, right? You know, probably just from all of the muscle memory and physiological adaptation that they've undergone being athletes. But so much of it is mental too. And this is your story. It's about being dealt, right, to use your metaphor, about being dealt a certain hand. And then no matter what, you're still in the game. You've got to play the hand, right? And that's a mental game. Yeah,
exactly. I think that all you can do is, when uncontrollables come your way, you're getting dealt cards that, you know, you're not the dealer, you can't choose what card you get. And you can't go to the dealer, you know, slip them $50 to choose your cards, you know. Whatever cards you get, they're your cards. And all you can do as a human being is leverage those cards as much as you possibly can and maximize your potential with those cards. And so even if you get shitty cards, are you going to let that destroy you and imprison you and stop you from living? Or are you going to grab them and make the most of your life anyway and, you know, still give it your very best shot? Because, you know, when difficulties come your way and it sets you back, you know, life is just going to keep on ticking. The sun's going to rise in the morning and set at night, and so it's going to go on without you. It doesn't care about how you feel. It doesn't care about how unfair your life is compared to someone else's. Seriously, it does not care about you or your life at all, or your story. So all that matters is are you going to ride the wave of life and continue on with it and, you know, just accept that unfair card that you have and become something anyway and do something with your life anyway and make a big impact on life anyway? Or are you gonna just crumble and, you know, play the victim card and say, why me? Oh, my life's unfair. His life is better than mine and easier than mine, so he can do this and I can't. Like, it's not for me. Are you gonna just do it anyway? Or are you gonna play that card and just waste your life away? And I think that the sooner you realize and accept the fact that life is unfair, the more liberated you will be, because when unfair situations do come your way, you know, you don't play that victim card. You aren't like, oh, well, he's got more opportunities than me, he's got a better chance than me, and therefore it wasn't meant to work out for me. It's like, who cares? Even though it's more unfair, you can still be greater than that person. You can still achieve all these things. It's like, accept it and just cop it and go do what you were going to do anyway. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, like I said, the sooner you realize that life is unfair, it's not meant to be fair, you're liberated to go do what you're going to do anyway, even though it's harder for you than somebody else. And so, yeah, I love using the analogies or anecdotes or stories of like some other people like who have been accused, been ridiculed, been like failed so many times, but have not let that set them back and imprison them and destroy them, where 99% of other people it would. So it's like the thing that distinguishes the greats and the people that have made a significant contribution to society and have left a legacy and have achieved those monumental things, compared to the people that we don't know, and we don't know their name and never amounted to what they could have been, is one's ability to not give up, ability to respond to those fails and improve continuously, and to try one more time when the other person didn't. So it's like, you know, J.K. Rowling, she published like, I don't know how many, like 23 books or something, 23 series of books, never made it, never went successfully. But the 24th was Harry Potter. Colonel Sanders, you know, he, for his whole life, he was a chef and, you know, sold recipes or pitched recipes to all these different restaurants, trying to get him on board and use his recipe up until he was 67, I think, 67.
Yeah.
Nothing, never made it, never got what he was trying to get. But at 67, that many years later, bang, KFC. And it's like, that's what I mean by the difference between those who make it, those who leave a legacy, those who make a significant contribution to society, and those people that you don't know the names of that never became who they were capable of becoming. The only difference is their ability to not give up and their ability to turn a fail into a fortune, whereas most other people let the fail destroy them and give up on their dreams. And it's also like, you know, when we're kids, when we're toddlers, when we're at primary school, all of us have these massive, monumental dreams and goals and hopes. And I want to become an astronaut, I want to become an actor or actress or singer, or I want to become the president or the prime minister, or I want to become, you know, the world's best surfer, I want to, you know, become a Nelson Mandela or a Muhammad Ali, all these things. We all were like that when we were kids. But then as we grow up, you know, external situations or people, they all tell us that, whether directly or indirectly, that we can't do those things, that we're meant to just work a 9-to-5 job, that we're meant to just be accountants or admin or all these jobs that, sure, they are very beneficial and needed and good, you know, respectable, essential jobs. But what happened to when you were younger, when you wanted to be an astronaut, when you wanted to do all these things, what happened, where did they go? And it's because you've been told directly or indirectly your whole entire life that you can't be that it's too hard. But it's like, well, no one said it was going to be easy. It's supposed to be hard, but you can still be it. And I don't know about you, but for me, I would much, much prefer to live a extremely difficult, hard, challenging life and leave an everlasting legacy and achieve the most monumental things and help as many people as I possibly can, than live an easy, comfortable life and become no one and die and no one remembers my name and leave no everlasting impact on society, you know? And it's like, say, like this is another analogy I like to use, is that before you're born, right? Before God's going to put you on this earth, you have a conversation with him. And God says to you, what do you want your life to be like? What do you want to achieve? What do you want to become? Who do you want to become? And you would tell him things like, I don't know, maybe I want to be the most courageous person that's ever lived, or I want to be the most resilient person that's ever lived, or I want to help as many people as I possibly can, right? And then God would say, okay, no worries, I can do that for you. Well, in order to help you to be the most courageous person that's ever lived, I'm going to put you through as many difficulties as anyone that's ever lived to train you to become the most courageous person that's ever lived. Or with resilience, similar thing. God would say to you, okay, well, I'm going to put you through the most tedious, boring, hard, difficult circumstances and the most relentless challenges in order to train you up to become the most resilient person that's ever lived. And so it's like when you go through life and it's challenging, it's what it takes, you know, to achieve those monumental things, to become great, to be whatever it is that you want your life to be. But then if before you were born, you say to God, oh, I want to not become anything, or I want to just be standard or average, well then God will be like, okay, you can have an easy life, you can have a comfortable life. I won't put you through any difficulties or suffering. So it's like in life, you shouldn't look for an easy life. You shouldn't look for comfort your whole life. You shouldn't look for a 9-to-5 job and then wake up late and sleep in, get 8 to 10 hours of sleep every night. You shouldn't avoid pain and suffering. You should be looking for discomfort. You should be looking to feel vulnerable. You should be looking to get out of your comfort zone. You should be looking for the challenges, looking for the difficulties, because that is what is going to be the input for the outcome of you becoming what you always wanted to become and achieving the monumental things and leaving an everlasting legacy. You know, all those people that you know of who, you know, like Marcus Aurelius, all like Thomas Edison, all these greats that have left a legacy that's still around today, even though their body left hundreds and thousands of years ago. Those people went through the most challenging journeys. It's what it takes. But that person you've never heard of that died in 1820, he probably had a much easier life, hence why you don't know his name anymore. So once you reframe your perspective of pain and suffering to see it as good rather than bad and imprisoning and setbacks, your whole life changes just like that.
So I want to ask you about risk, because I can see how, for example, if we take this as like the Alex Noble philosophy, right? The Noble way, we take this as a life philosophy. It still seems to me that you could apply it at different levels of risk. From the standpoint of, like, for example, my 10-year-old son, right? I could say, take this Noble way philosophy and start applying it at 10 years old. He might say, okay, should I play rugby, for example, right? He's getting to that age where sport is starting, in this country, sport is serious. So much of mateship centers around sport, right? So much of social activity centers around sport. Me as a parent, I might look at it a little bit differently. I might look at it in terms of, okay, do I do some things to steer him towards sort of the rugby, more conventional sports where there's a sort of like high impact factor, but potentially more risk? Or do I steer him maybe towards something a little bit more controlled, tennis or volleyball, something like that, that may not have as many, you know, the risk of injury may not be as high. What do you think about risk, and how should we think about risk?
So, yeah, good question. My overarching principle and the way I approach risk is that I think that it's so important to embrace vulnerability, embrace risk, embrace discomfort. Because when you're in those risky, uncomfortable, vulnerable situations, it's those situations where you grow the most every time. And that's when you level up. That's when you achieve the most monumental things that you've achieved. When you're in your comfort zone, in bed, scrolling through TikTok, you're not growing, you're not achieving anything. You're just, you know, comfort, I think, is the most addictive and detrimental drugs in the world. And it is so addictive and literally kills souls. Like, it completely imprisons you. And it is one of the main factors that prevents people from reaching their full potential, because it is so addictive just to feel okay and feel comfortable and feel warm and cozy. And, you know, for me, I would much prefer to live 40 years of incredible accomplishments and serving others and making a contribution to society that lasts forever, and going through those pain and suffering and difficulties and discomfort and vulnerability, than living 80 years in the corner of a room, you know, wrapped up in cotton wool, warm and comfortable, and never actually doing anything or accomplishing anything, you know. So I think it's important. But as for your more specific question to do with like sport, I think that calculated risks are important, weighing up returns on the risk. Like if it's the risk and no return or reward, maybe it's more of a common way to say it, risk and reward. If the reward is not that great relative to the risk, well then it's kind of stupid risk, right? I don't believe in stupid risks, but if the reward of the risk could be great and could be monumental, then I'm all in. And I think that given it is guaranteed that you will die, and it is guaranteed that you are going to become zero at the end of your life, you're all in anyway. Like that, it's the riskiest thing. And so you may as well go all in, because in the end, you're going to die anyway. So nothing can be less than dying. Like dying is bottom line, you know? So you've only got one shot, you may as well take the risk. But if it's going to, like, I don't know, jump off a bridge to land in really shallow water, it's like, what's the reward on that? Nothing really. What's the risk on that? Injury, you know, broken leg, all these things. It's just like, okay, maybe don't do that. You know what I mean? But yeah, like I said, if the reward could be helping 1,000 people compared to one by like doing public speaking, like for me, you know, getting up on the crowd, in front of a crowd, speaking to, you know, a massive crowd, and, you know, you're opening up and getting vulnerable, sharing your message and speaking to all these people. Like the risk is I could embarrass myself. The risk is I could choke and say the wrong word. People could laugh at me. People could ridicule me. People could, you know, pay me out, and yeah, I could feel embarrassed, right? That's the risk. But the reward is maybe saving someone's life, maybe helping someone achieve a goal that they're trying to get. Maybe it is to help someone that's sad to actually find happiness, you know? So the risk and reward there, like, of course I'm gonna do that. I can't remember, this is in the book too, but I never was a public speaker, right? I hated it. I still don't really like it. I don't like getting up in front of a crowd, in front of one person, 100 people, 500, 100,000 people. Like, I feel uncomfortable. I'm nervous. I don't want to do it. I much prefer to be in the crowd there, you know, having some popcorn, watching someone else be up there. It's way more comfortable. I would love to do that. Like, it's addictive, and that's the comfort and the imprisoning. But if I never embrace that discomfort of being up on stage and embrace that risk of failing, being laughed at, losing, saying the wrong words, well, then I would never be able to help that person to find happiness. I would never be able to save a life. I'd never be able to help someone achieve their goal. So therefore, for me, the reward far outweighs the risk, and therefore I'm gonna go and do that every time, even though I don't wanna do it. And so that kind of also, that principle of embracing vulnerability and discomfort also kind of goes hand in hand with my perspective on discipline, because it's like, I believe in life we should always prioritize discipline over motivation, because I see discipline as doing what you should do rather than what you want to do, because what you want to do isn't always what you should do. Often we want to just go to the movies and, you know, 5 days a week and have popcorn and watch movies. Often we want to go to bed early and wake up late and have 10 hours of sleep. Often we want to just stay in bed and not go to work one day. Often we want to just eat that pizza and then ice cream, and the next day eat badly again. Often what we want to do is, not the best outcome for us. So what we should do is a whole different ballgame. So it's like, even if you don't want to do something, but it is going to benefit you the most and going to help you to get what your ultimate goal is, well then go to that thing, even though at times you don't want to do it. So it's like, when you implement that discipline principle, then even when you wake up in the morning and you're tired and it's really cold and you want to just keep the covers on and stay warm in bed and turn the alarm off and sleep for another 5 hours, even though that's what you want to do, you'd love to do that. With discipline, you get up anyway. Whereas I think motivation is a little bit different, because you only do things when you're motivated to do it. So like, we'll use that same example. You'd only go to work that day when you're motivated to go to work that day. But you're not always motivated. You know, motivation is fleeting. So some days you won't want to go to work. And therefore, if you're relying on motivation, you end up just stay in bed and keep the covers on and turn the alarm off. And therefore, that's going to have a negative effect on your ability to achieve your goals. So And that translates to, I can think of 1,000 examples right now. So doing what you should do rather than what you want to do, and focusing on your future self rather than your current self, because often your current self tricks you into believing that that current thing is the right thing, but really it's going to have a detrimental impact on your future self. So choosing what to do in the present based on the perspective of your future self. What would your 80-year-old self want you to do right now? What would your tomorrow self want you to do right now? Is that future self going to wish you didn't eat that pizza right now? Or is your future self going to wish you had that pizza right now and feel sick for the rest of the day and be more unhealthy? So I guarantee you that future self is probably going to wish you ate clean. That's just one example. And as Abraham Lincoln says, he goes, discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most. And I think that's the most perfectly well put definition of the discipline principle that I believe in and that I follow and that I live my life by. Yeah, I kind of translate that into my whole life. Everything I do, every decision I make is from the lens of myself when I'm lying there in my deathbed. I'm like, what would that person wish I did? For me, I think that hell is the place where you meet the person that you could have become. In other words, hell is where you see what your potential was, what God had in store for you, and the gap between what you did and what you achieved and who you did become compared to what you could have become. I think that's hell. And on the other hand, heaven is where you became the person that you could become. Or another kind of analogy that I use to kind of demonstrate that more is, imagine after you die, you go to heaven and you go to speak to God, and he's sitting there at a table and there's a queue of other people that have recently passed away, and you're up next in the queue. You go to the table, you see God, you say, hey, how are you? And he has a sheet in front of him and it's a list, right? And on the top of the list is everything you were supposed to do, the person you were supposed to become, or the person I had in store for you, right? And under that title is all these dot points of, Alex Noble, to become a doctor, to become a lawyer, to help 1,000 people find happiness, to inspire hundreds of thousands of people, to present keynotes to hundreds of thousands of people across all of Australia, to travel around the world and share your message, to go on podcasts and share your message, to help inspire and give positive, beneficial advice to others, to write a best-selling motivational book. And then God turns that paper around and shows you. And he says to you, this is what I had in store for you. This is what you were supposed to do. This is what you were supposed to achieve. This is who you were supposed to become. Did you or did you not become that person? And I think the goal is to make sure each one of those were ticked off. And that's the way I approach my life. I want to make sure that when I do meet God, that every single one of those are ticked off, because I think that if I do get to that table where God turns around that piece of paper to me and shows it to me, and I see things that are not ticked because I chose to prioritize my own comfort and my own pleasures over, putting the effort to and the sacrifice and the pain and suffering to tick off all those boxes, then I know that I'll be extremely disappointed and pissed off, and I would regret, and I'll wish I could go back to where I am at 22 years old in this room and try to do my best to tick off those boxes. That's kind of how I approach my life. I approach my life backwards. And so that's what I mean by that discipline principle translating into my everyday life.
So there are figures like Dave Goggins. There's a few other people on the internet who, you could loosely classify as sort of in the genre of suffering porn, right? Where suffering becomes almost a sport where, he's like, watch running 10Ks, 20Ks, just get it done, wake up, do it. It's happening, right? And there's, in my view, very little room for, in a sense, self-forgiveness or some level of self-love. It's gone to a point where it's black and white. I'm curious about what you think about some people in this genre where it's sort of, men, just shut up and do more. Shut up, get this done, and everything like this. But also, because I mentioned this because you mentioned mental health early as we began the show. For maybe some young men who have some difficulties in terms of getting that motivation. They're finding it harder to find or stick to the discipline. What's the right balance between being tough on yourself, setting goals, but at the same time forgiving yourself if you muck up along the way?
Yeah, I definitely align with kind of the message or the perspective of, the pain and suffering that kind of like David Goggins talks about. I definitely align myself with that. But I think what I would also add to that in order to accommodate people that are suffering or having challenges with that kind of approach, you shouldn't be hard on yourself if you fail, or you shouldn't be not self-forgiving. Sure, try your very best. Sure, embrace the discomfort and the pain and the suffering. Get outside of your comfort zone, train up your resilience, because when you're putting yourself in those situations, like for example, David Goggins, why aren't you running 10Ks or whatever, it's like, sure, some people might think that's unnecessary, but every time that you get out of your comfort zone and you apply stress on that threshold of that discipline and that discomfort, you're raising the bar every time. So the more you train your discipline, the more you train to get out of your comfort zone, that threshold goes up and up and up, and therefore you can withstand more and more and more. So, but if you're not training it, it lowers too. So the more you get out of your comfort zone, the more capable you will be, and the more resilient and the more able you will be to cope with challenges in everyday life. It transfers to all difficulty. So even if you're like getting up early each morning, when you don't want to, that might seem unnecessary to some people, to sleep in, but it's like, no, well, each time I do that, it's raising the bar of how much I can withstand. So then, because my bar, initially, if I didn't get up early each morning, it would be here. But because I've done it every morning, I keep on pushing my limits, training myself to get out of my comfort zone. The bar goes up and up and up. So my bar's actually here compared to otherwise it'll be here. So therefore, when I come across a difficulty in my life, where life storm comes my way, I will be more equipped and prepared to confront and overcome that difficulty, because my threshold and my bar is here rather than here. And so I guess that goes back to the start of this conversation with being equipped and prepared for life storms, because we're not as prepared anymore because life's so easy, because everything's just instant gratification, right? Everything's at the tip of our fingers. So I think it's important to train it. But for the people that are practicing that discipline but challenging with it, as per your question, and the self-forgiveness, I think it's really important to be self-forgiving. And when you might fail, don't be hard on yourself, but don't not try again. Like, you got to get up again, try again, identify what you could have done better and what you maybe weren't so good at, and try and improve. But definitely be self-forgiving. And I think also not just focus on, what do you call it? Suffering porn or porn suffering. Yeah, not only look for suffering in life, because sure, that will help you grow and help you in many ways, but it also has side effects. Like, it's also important to be honest, I did go down that route a bit, where I was kind of overly obsessed with just growth and accomplishing and striving to, achieve as much as I possibly could, and trying to reach my full potential, and just trying to, I guess, build my life as much as I possibly can, not materialistically, but just in all elements. I went heavily down that road, and I still do, of course, but there was a period where I kind of would sacrifice a lot of other things in order to build my life as much as possible, which I think it is good to sacrifice some pleasures. Pleasures are often the killer of many people's souls, but to a certain extent. I think I had a realization when, just before writing the book, actually from the period I started writing to about chapter 15, where I reframed it a little bit, and I realized that life shouldn't just be about suffering and porn suffering and focusing on it in order to build your life, but it's also important to have elements of fun, of joy, as long as that fun and joy and pleasure doesn't become negatively impactful, where it limits your happiness or limits your growth, So I kind of break it down into, in the book, and my life, I go and live by ticking off 4 criteria. One is leaving a legacy, because that way, when you die, you're not actually dying. You can kind of become immortal. And what I mean by that is when you so-called die, usually without leaving a legacy, everything is gone. Everything is erased off this earth forever, except your kids and maybe grandkids. But your grandkids' kids aren't going to remember you, and that's where it kind of stops. And then in 100 years' time, 400 years' time, it's like you'll never hear, right? But when you're able to leave a legacy, whether that's a message passed on, whether that's an invention that you're leaving behind, whether that's whatever it is, that way when you so-called die, yeah, your body's gone, but you are still living, you are still around. Your message and the impact that you've had on your family and friends and society, and the message that you passed on to them and the strategies that you shared that they're living by and they're passing on to their kids and their kids and their kids, well, that is you. That message, that advice, that is you. Your body's not you. Your body's just your body. But who's you? Who am I? That is that legacy you're leaving behind. So that way you can live forever. And second thing is love, family, friends, relationships. Third is to have fun, enjoy, travel, taste good food, drink nice wine, see the places, go to the countries, go to the cities, learn, study history, all these things, enjoy, live, have fun. It's important, as long as it doesn't start impeding on your ability to reach your full potential. And the last thing is, of course, to make as much money as you can. Of course, because money makes life easier. Often it can be the killer of many people too, but if you're ticking off all 4 of those boxes, that 4 criteria, well then go for it. Make as much money as you possibly can. It's going to make your life easier. It's going to make your life open up more opportunities in so many different ways. So yeah, that's how I approach my life now, ensuring that I maximize each one of that criteria. Legacy, family, and love, and friends and relationships, fun, joy, and money. And that's how you live a fulfilled, holistic life.
To what extent do you see your role as a truth teller?
I'm never really classified as a truth teller, but I would like to, and I think I have dedicated my life to sharing my message, which includes my strategies and insights and perspective, with as many people as I possibly can, in order for those people to adopt, acquire, and implement those strategies in their own life to help them on their own pathway, to help them to find happiness in darkness, to help them to overcome a challenge, to help them to be resilient, to achieve whatever goal that is that they're pursuing, even though it might be completely separate to mine, and most importantly, to help others become the person they're capable of becoming. Because I feel like in my life and my experiences, I have been forced to learn a lot of very powerful and valuable lessons, and I've also used some very effective strategies which have not only helped me to get through some of the darkest periods of my life, but also to overcome and go beyond and achieve and become more than I ever thought that I was capable of becoming, not only in my life, but in a million years. And so those lessons and strategies that I learnt and use, I'm trying to give others access to them as well, so they can also assist those people if needed in their own life. And that way, when I die at 80 years old or whatever it might be, whether it's tomorrow or a week or 80 or 90, when my body goes, I'm not actually dying, because my message, my strategies, my lessons that I've shared, my, we call wisdom and advice, is with other people, is with yourself. It is with my mum and dad and family and friends. It is with all those people in the audience that I've spoken to when I'm doing keynotes, or all those listeners to this podcast. They have access to me. Me is my message. And when people acquire parts of my message and pass it on to their family members or whoever it may be, then those family members or their kids then pass it on to their kids pass on those principles and strategies on to their kids. And that way, in 1,000 years' time, although my body's gone, I'm still living, because my message is still being passed on throughout society. And that's what I've dedicated my life to, because now I'm no longer scared of dying, because I'm not dying. I've dedicated my life to trying to become immortal, essentially. So yeah, I guess that has provided me meaning and purpose. And my goal is to have the most significant and beneficial impact on society as I possibly can and contribute as much as I possibly can to the world in a beneficial way.
I asked that question because I think if you could attempt to boil the philosophy down in any way, I think there's no way that you can avoid this idea of truth, of honesty, and it comes through so vividly in the book, when you talk about the pressure sores and how, it was, and also listening to your voice talking about the pressure sores and your honesty about the fear of this, it just brings the reader in, it brings the reader into a whole new world. That we have no concept of something that to an able-bodied person, you just, we've been sitting here for 90 minutes. I've moved, how many times? I should ask you, right? Do you need, scratch your shoulder, as you mentioned in the book too, about able-bodied people needing to, or quads needing to train able-bodied people to look after them too. So I guess one thing that strikes me so vividly about your account, again, the book, is just how brave you are in being honest about so many of these things, because they're out there. There's things that people have been victims of tragedy. They've suffered catastrophe since the beginning of time. In a sense, there's nothing new about it. It's just that in this version, you're in this situation, we're all around you, we're civilians living in this other world, and you have this unique perspective, and you have this opportunity to tell us your truth, right? Which is our truth. And I just wanted to thank you for that. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for that dedication. There's so many moments, I think, where I don't think you give yourself enough credit for how brave you are. There are so many moments where you could self-deceive and say this or gloss something out or omit something else, but you give us the unvarnished truth. And for that, I think I'm a huge supporter.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. Well, from my lens, I guess I see it as if I didn't share my insights, it would be selfish, I see my traumatic experience as a blessing because it has provided me with lessons and strategies and insight and the ability to share all those things with others. And so God has granted me those insights and strategies and lessons. And so why should I just keep them for myself, why do I just get to get them? I think that a lot of people would benefit from these insights, and hence why I feel like I have a responsibility and an obligation to also provide that with others, because if I just kept it for myself, it would be selfish. And so this way, other people throughout society, they won't have to go through the traumatic experiences that I went through. They wouldn't have to go through the suffering and the extreme, challenges, but can also still have access to those lessons and strategies that I've learned and use in order to help benefit them in their own life and apply it in their own life to help them with whatever goal they're pursuing, whether that's happiness or to get that promotion or to, develop and enhance that relationship with their brother or whatever it is. And so, that's my duty and my responsibility. And also, more specifically in regards to sharing the things that are involved with like spinal cord injuries and disabilities, I feel like I've got a platform now where I can give other people more knowledge and education on spinal cord injuries and the situation that I'm in and many other people are in throughout the world, because it's not like people don't care or they don't get it, it's just that they've never been exposed to it. Like up until I got injured, I thought every single person in a wheelchair was the same. Like I never even thought twice about it. It's not like that I was intentionally being rude or anything. I just never even was a thought because I never really knew anyone in a wheelchair. And so, I guess now it is good to share or educate others so they can have more knowledge about it. And so that way it can close the gap between able-bodied people and disabled people to make it more in conjunction in one, because they're both human, but there is a big gap between, because one has a disability and one doesn't. And the knowledge barrier about, what they can do, what they can't do, what diagnosis they have compared to what other people in a wheelchair have, what their capabilities are, all these things. And I guess another reason I do what I do and I strive so hard to achieve and do and become as much as I possibly can is to show the world, I guess, that even though I have all those limitations that most people don't have, I can still, by going above and beyond the average person, it shows that the average person can do it, definitely do it too, because if I can do it, well then surely that can inspire other people that have self-belief that they can too, because they're starting here, I'm starting here, but I'm going here, then this person should then feel, self-confident and belief and hope that they can also become here, if not here. And so I guess, my responsibility and my goal is to empower others to believe in themselves and to reach their true potential. And when I say true potential, not just, going above and beyond what they think they are capable of achieving, because I genuinely believe that, I'm nearly 100% confident that people's true potential is so much more than what they think they can do and what they think they become. Because even for me, I know that I sometimes think that I do try my very best in everything I do, but I always know that I could still do better. Even if I do literally give it 100% max, I know that I'll never be at 100% max. But the fact that I'm willing to give it my absolute all, but knowing that I'll never be able to actually do that, I guess enables me to continually try harder, dedicate myself more in order to grow and maximize and build my life as much as I possibly can. Whereas I compare myself to a lot of other people that I know that they don't try as nearly hard as me. I'm not talking about everyone, I just know a few people that I'm referring to, but they actually think and they genuinely believe that they're trying their best. I'm like, God, that is so limiting. I'm like, you need to realize that you're putting the only limitations right now are in your own head. The fact that you think that you're working so hard or trying so hard and you're putting in your absolute effort, but I can just definitely say that you could be so much more than you are. You could be trying so much more than you are. That might sound a little bit, I guess, confronting or negative to that person initially, but I think that saying that to a person that, you're trying hard, but you could be so much better than you are, you could try so much harder, is actually way more empowering than saying, you are trying your best, or you are at your full potential, or you're doing great. I think it's more selfless and more beneficial and helpful to say to that person, you're doing great, but you could be so much better than you are. And isn't that a whole lot more empowering and liberating to know that you're capable of achieving and accomplishing more? Whereas if you say that you're at your max, you're doing the best you can, that means they're limited. It's like, you think I got no more in me? You got no more hope for me? It's like, I think we gotta change the terminology and the way we approach that kind of conversation, I reckon.
For sure, and to think about, just spending this time together physically in the same room, we could put a little list together of the things you can't do, but that's just stupid. The list of things you can do, right? The list of things that you could do is infinite. That, people might, you begin the interview talking about, okay, you can't do this, or you can't do this, or there's something obvious, you can't do a few things, right? But when you frame it that way, part of this is the quality of your thoughts argument, right? That you talk about in the book and that you've mentioned in this interview. It's about reframing about that potential and what you can do, And again, so many people, they get stopped at that failure of imagination, right? Go pick up Chaucer's Tales and start memorizing it. Go walk, to Brisbane, from New South Wales. Go do something. Talk to someone. Help someone. Figure something out. Relive something. Do something. And I think that's part of the inspiration that you're bringing, right? Is that sort of reminder. And And I wanted to ask you too, we mentioned faith, right? But I think from a Christian point of view, is there some sense, I don't know, maybe it's hard for you to speak about this yourself, but would mom, for example, or someone in the church, would they, framing it with a religious lens, would they in some ways say that, well, God had a plan for you, right? And that you were going down this direction, and it was God's intent to rearrange your life so that you could then focus in this new direction?
Yeah, I believe in that, like kind of everything happens for a reason, but only part of it, because I think that it can also cause some people it can also be a limitation for some people, because it might cause them to just think, God has a plan for me, whatever happens, happens. And consequently, they don't try to create their own opportunities. They don't try to put in their all, because they're like, God's got me. It's like the analogy, there's the guy out at sea and he was sailing in the, wide open ocean, and there's a big storm that came and knocked off his sail, lost his boat, and sail broke and the boat's upside down, he's just hanging on. And he was there for like 3 days, and the first day, this big cruise ship or bay liner came across and they said, mate, are you okay? Like, do you need help? And he goes, no, it's okay. Like, God's got me. I trust God. And then they go, okay, bye. Next day, another bay liner, and he's still out there all night, raining, cold, freezing. The sun goes up the next day, bay liner comes. Oh, mate, like, are you okay? Do you need help? Like, he goes, no, God's got a path for me. I'm trusting God. It's all good. And then anyway, another night goes by, another day, and he ends up not making it, passes away. And then he goes to God, like, I had faith in you, I trusted you my whole life. Like, I was dedicated, religious, I had faith and trust, and why weren't you there for me? I thought you had a path for me, like, what were you doing? He goes, I did. I sent 2 bay liners to come your way to help you and pick you up. And so it's like, if you don't see those opportunities, if you don't try and create your own opportunities, if you don't be strategic about it and put in the effort and make your own decisions too, then you're probably not going to, reach that full potential. So yes, God probably does have a path for you, things do happen for a reason, but often you have to create that reason, is the point I'm trying to make. So it's like, I would say that my situation was definitely a blessing. Like, I'm very grateful for it, changed my life and made it so much better. But it also could have been the worst thing that ever happened to me if I chose to respond that way. So it's like, God can give you a path, but I guess you have to decide whether that path is going to be thorns or whether it's going to be roses. And I chose to make sure it's roses. And I think that, we always have the power to choose whether it's going to be thorns or roses. And as long as we have that power, that's all we'll ever need, I think. Yeah.
Definitely. To have the power, again, in a way to filter, right? Because when you talk about the quality of the thoughts, I like this idea that there is still some responsibility on the filterer to decide and to shape those thoughts into quality thoughts, right? And that it's not simply you going into receiver mode, right? And then kind of going along with it. At the end of the day, to live the noble way, things happen, we receive noise, and then we have to make signal out of it.
Yeah, that's the way I see it. It's like everything is a stimulus, and you decide whether or not that stimulus is good or bad, essentially. High level, black and white approach to it, but it's like the narrative of 2 people in the same situation, walking down the same street at the same time, seeing all the same things, but one is extremely happy in that situation, but the other is completely miserable in that situation, simply because of the way they respond and interpret that stimulus. So it's like, I think in life, it's not the actual stimulus that makes us feel a certain way or determines the outcome, but it's our judgment and our interpretation and our response to that stimulus that then makes us feel a certain way or results in the outcome. And so, that responsibility of choosing how you interpret that stimulus is up to you. That's solely on you. So it's like, you don't go through your life and say, oh, this happened to me and therefore I feel this way. This happened to me and therefore I'm like this. Or this happened to me and therefore I never did that and I can't do that, and hence why I didn't go to see this place, or I didn't get that mark, or I didn't get that job. It's like, you should change your terminology and say, oh, but I chose not to respond to my situation this way and therefore I'm not like this. So that way, because you got to take accountability and responsibility, and that is essential. And I think it's important to realize that you should take accountability for your outcomes, you know? And sure, it's harder for some people than others, but a lot of times the people that do go through more suffering are more likely to play the victim card of, oh, I'm not like this because of this situation and stimulus. I think they do that to justify or to make themselves feel better, because it's like not putting the responsibility on them. It's like they're putting it on their circumstance, the hand they've been dealt, or the cards that they've been dealt. I got these cards. It's the card's fault. It's the situation's fault. It's the situation God put me in's fault. But it really should be put the blame on yourself. And that way, when you put the blame on yourself and you take accountability, you become so much more empowered to go and do what you wanted to do, become the person you're capable of being. And in the end, you'll look back in your life and you'll be so grateful that you took that accountability and you put the blame on yourself, and that way you can make the most of your life. You've only got one shot, you're only here once. And so just go for it. Like, you're all in anyway, so you may as well just give it your all, give it your best shot. I think another thing that I've realized is I used to think that there was like an afterlife, and like you'd get another shot in your afterlife, or you'd become back as like a different human or an animal or something. And that kind of, I think a lot of people have that same perspective, and I think that's actually really limiting too. I think that what that does is like, it doesn't put the urgency on now, doesn't put the urgency on this life and making the most of it and getting up in the morning, because you're like, yeah, it's okay, I can just do it in my next life. What I've intentionally chose to see the afterlife as in now is that it is blank after you die, that nothing is, you're gone forever, right? And I think that, yeah, that's more confronting and horrible, but consequently, it makes now so much more beautiful. It makes you appreciate and love life more now, because you do realize this is the only chance you're gonna get it. And yeah, it provides beauty, but also it provides that urgency for now, provides that urgency to get up in the morning and hustle and go help people and contribute and achieve that goal and see this place and travel this place and book that flight and ask for that promotion and have that meeting and, you know, send that email, all these things, because this is all you've got. Make the freaking most of it, rather than being like, it's okay, I'll do it next life. And so even that simple reframing and that taking accountability and reframing of my perception has changed my life dramatically. And now I've, ticked more boxes than I ever thought that I could possibly tick in a million years, simply because of that urgency and that need and that requirement for myself to reach my full potential and to become the person that I'm capable of becoming. Because like I said, I don't want to get to the afterlife and see God and realize that I could have done more, I could have been more, because I think that will be hell for me, and I don't want to have that regret on my deathbed or wondering if I could have done more, or wondering who I could have been, or wondering what I could have done or who I could have helped, you know? I want to be completely confident and satisfied that I did my best and that I reached my full potential, and that way I'll be prepared to die. And I think that by living your life by preparing to die is preparing to live. One of my favorite quotes is, to philosophize is to learn how to die, and to learn how to die is to learn how to live. And so by learning how to die, by preparing how to die, AKA by preparing for that moment on your deathbed, moments before you die, and looking back in your life and being fully satisfied and content and happy with your life, and knowing that you reach your full potential and you became the person you're capable of being, by preparing for that moment, that's how you're going to live every day, and that's how you're going to ensure that you fulfill your life. And that way, when you're on that deathbed, you're good, you're ready to go, and you won't die wondering.
I think that's a lovely place to conclude, and I think you deserve more acknowledgement for being too modest about the bravery that it's taken you to get to this point, really. And you've inspired me. And again, you fight, I fight. I take the pledge. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Really.
I appreciate it.